Welcome to the Art Against Mental Illness podcast. My name is Alex Lovelace and this is my podcast about the healing powers of art for artists, art lovers, the art curious and anyone with an interest in mental health and well-being. Hello everybody. So this is the third in my talking therapy sessions, which are interviews with artists and creatives. This one's with Rob. He's a really interesting guy. He goes by the moniker the Painting Nomad. He doesn't stay in one place for very long and he's not technologically particularly up to date, and therefore we had various challenges in recording this episode since we are located in different places. And so after battling with technology for quite some time, I ended up cobbling together a solution so I could at least capture something. But the sound quality is not good, which is a real shame because this was such an interesting interview and he's a really interesting guy. But I believe you can hear everything. It's not always as clear as it could be in some places. I lost him entirely towards the end. It was just breaking up because of poor network. So if the off-ramp to this episode seems a little bit cobbled and rushed, and that's because I had to piece it together from what little bits of communication we were able to. But otherwise, I think it's a really amazing interview, so I hope you enjoy it. I have another interview lined up, which will be out in the next week or two. So watch this space, and otherwise, I'll see you soon. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Rob Parkinson, aka the Painting Nomad, whose story is somewhat surprisingly even more interesting than his moniker. Rob would usually be found rambling the highways and byways of the UK, but since it's late December, he's someplace warmer than his usual home, which is a tent. Hi, Rob. Where are you coming to us from today?
I'm up in Durham. Hi, Alex.
And how come you find yourself there?
One of my customers, who used to be just a customer, now is a very good friend. He's collected quite a few paintings, and he had basically a spare house. So him and his lady friend with partner, they got together and moved into his house, and her house was left spare. And instead of renting it out, they've just sort of been sat on it. When I got to a point where last year I finished doing a specific project, and he just said, if you want the keys to this house, you can have them. Come and move in, look after it. So it was on the border of, because it's near to Scotland, and I was looking to go into Scotland to do some work up there, then it worked out perfectly. And I've been here for about a year now, using it as a base, going backwards and forwards to different places.
And so it's nice and warm, and you're not that far from me, so I'm guessing it's about as gloomy as it is outside for you as it is for me. Why don't you tell us your story and why you usually find yourself in a tent?
It's quite a long story. If I was to take about 11 years, I'm a full-time artist now. I'm a full-time oil painter. I've been painting since 2014, full-time. Just to put it into context, I paint mainly landscapes, seascapes, and it's kind of a documentary of my travels. That's the main context of what I do. And it kind of began around about 2014. I've been working in a job for quite some time. I moved around quite a bit. I've moved to London. Been originally born in Manchester, but moved down to Bournemouth. So I was in Bournemouth at the time, and I'd been working it was a really good job. I really enjoyed the company, and I loved the people that I was working with, but it was a 9 to 5. I was working full time, and I started to feel myself getting very stressed with it. It was something it was a kind of a grind that I found the 9 to 5. I'm not very good at the 9 to 5 thing. I've always been creative. I've always been somehow involved in the arts from an early age, mostly music as it goes. In my very earlier days, I was in bands quite a lot. I did move to London and I took up music professionally, and I was making music for films. That was a main thing that I was doing up in London, which was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I do play several instruments, and I do quite a crazy thing called Foley art, which is making the sound effects for films. So when a door goes slam, it's a bloke with 2 pieces of wood and a microphone. So if you imagine all the film sounds that you get, I did that live. So it was making music and sound effects live to film. So that was a very cool, creative outlet for me, and I loved it. But living in London, I found that was very taxing. The chaos of London, the hectic lifestyle, the fact that you can earn good money but you spend it just as quick is a lot of pressure. And I found that when I came back to Bournemouth just for one visit, I went to visit the sea and the coast, and I suddenly felt this incredible weight lifting off me. And I didn't realise at the time, but I'd been becoming really depressed in London. I had been really feeling it as not being in nature, not having natural surroundings. There were no flat horizons in London. Everything is broken up. It's quite a thing that I found. As soon as I saw the flat horizon of the sea, it was the first time I'd seen that since 2 years. And I just realised that was something that I really needed in my life. I actually coined the phrase flat horizon deficiency. So if you live in cities and towns and everything and you don't have that flat horizon, it can kind of bring you down. And it's a massive boost when you do get that. So I made a conscious decision to move back to Bournemouth, even though the London scene for me was fantastic and I loved being in the music, but I couldn't live with continually going down and down. So I moved. And I was in this job. And as mentioned, it was a brilliant company, brilliant people, but the 9 to 5, I wasn't doing very well with it. It was grinding me down yet again because I need to be creative. And I was starting to put quite a few things together, knowing that, yes, I need to be in nature or around close to nature, especially the sea. And I need to be creative more than just for an hour or two in the evenings after finishing work. Now, in 2013, I bought myself a camper van. I got a little VW T4 and I absolutely loved it. As soon as I finished work, I was jumping in that and going off exploring. I go to the beach, I go into the forests. I put an old mattress in the back and a sleeping bag and some cooking stuff, and I started staying overnight in places. And this was way back in 2013, before the major van life scene had exploded, which is massive now. This was at a time where people were kind of thinking I was a bit of an idiot for wanting to go out and live in my van for 2 or 3 days at a time. But I loved it, absolutely loved it. And I got to the point where I realised that I was spending more time in my camper van over the week than I was in my really nice flat that I had. And I kind of thought, this is now something that I thought about, and I thought I could move into my van. I could move into it full time, and it would cost me a hell of a lot less than what I'm spending. It's costing me £1,000 a month just to have a flat, and essentially it was just a very expensive storage unit for things that I didn't need or use. So another conscious decision, I thought, I'm going to try this. I'm going to give my flat up. I'm going to move into my van. And I literally, over the course of 2 months, I handed my notice into my landlord. I gave most of my possessions away. I put a few special bits into storage, and that was it. I moved into my van with a couple of bin bags of stuff, a bag of clothes, still had the old mattress in the back and a cooking stove, and off I went. And I started living full-time in my little camper van. But I was still going to work, and I was still doing the 9 to 5 thing, so I was having to go back to that same base 5 days a week to keep up with the work. And even though I was having a fantastic time in the evenings and the weekend, I just realised that I needed to be in that environment more. I needed to get away from the hamster wheel, so to speak. So I realised that my wages that I was earning, I was saving quite a bit, but I didn't need the money. The only money that I needed was enough to get by, enough food, fuel, and a little bit extra just in case. And I thought, I could get by on £300 a month. I don't need this big paycheck. So why am I doing this job? So I tried to sort of come up with an idea of thinking, how can I come up with a plan to creatively fund my lifestyle? And I've always been into painting since I was very young. I got seriously into painting when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I did a lot of painting, got into oil painting especially, all quite abstract and quite experimental, but I did it a lot, and I've always painted at some point. And I thought, I wonder if I came up with this plan of painting a little oil painting of wherever I was travelling to in my camper van. It could be the beach, it could be the forest, it could be somewhere away. If I just came up with one painting every day and then put them online, and if people bought them and I was making, even if it was just £15 or £20 a day, for each one of those paintings, then that would be enough for my food, my fuel, and whatever I needed. So I planned that, and I put the date to say on the 1st of January 2014, I'm going to begin that project. So I was only planning to stay in the van, travelling around, living in it over the summer. So I thought when it gets to winter, it's just going to be obviously too cold. Back then, you couldn't get Chinese diesel heaters, or it was very expensive to get a heater at that time. And I thought, it'll get to the winter, see what it's like. I'll get to October. But I realised that I'd started to acclimatise to the cold. It was quite a strange phenomenon. I didn't realise that you could kind of like, as soon as it starts gradually getting colder, your body kind of gets used to it. And I did. And everybody else was wearing thick coats and jumpers and 2 pairs of trousers, and I was still walking around in a t-shirt and shorts, thinking, this is a bit strange, but it's okay. So I carried on into the winter. And when it got to the 1st of January, I had actually previously told on Facebook and on the Facebook groups that I'm going to do this project of painting a day, and explained about it. And I set up a blog with the help of a friend. And on the 1st of January, I went to a New Year's Eve party at a pub in Dorset, famously the Square and Compass pub. And the next morning, around about midday, I opened the back of the van up, and I just painted a picture, a little tiny 7-inch by 5-inch oil painting of the fields surrounding the back of the car park. And I thought, I've actually done the first painting. And I put that on the blog, and I put it online. So there's painting number 1. And I did a little write-up as to what it was and where I'd been, a little story behind it. The next day, we had the day off work, because I was still working at the time. And I went off and I did another painting. And the third day, I had to go to work, back at work again. But in the evening, as soon as I finished, I got back in the van, and the first thing I did was did another little painting. I actually painted a feather that I found on the path. So that was 3, and then 4, 5, 6, 7 paintings that got done. And I was continuously putting these online and writing up the blog, posting up paintings onto Facebook. And for my surprise, it started to really gather momentum very, very quickly. And a lot of people were messaging, getting in touch. And then people did start to say, are these paintings for sale? Which for me was the holy grail of what I was looking for. And I thought the best way to sell these, I don't want to put a price on because I don't know what they're worth. I couldn't price the work. So I decided just to put them on eBay. And I set up an eBay account, and I put all of the paintings on. By the time I'd done that, I had 10 paintings. So I'd done 10 days, 10 paintings. I put them all on eBay. I put them with no reserve. I put them at a start price of 99p, and just let people bid on them and decide what they thought they were worth. And I thought, if I get 10 or 15 quid for each one, I'd be really happy. And it got to the end of the 7 days of the auction, and some of them were going up to 30, some 40. And I had 10 of these up, and by the end of the auctions, they all ended on the same day. And I made something like 300 quid. And I thought, that's exactly what I need. I couldn't believe it, to be honest. I was like surprised, but absolutely elated, of course. And I was carrying on. By the time it got to the end of January, obviously that's 31 paintings I've done, and each one of those are all sold. So I was starting to put them on daily auctions. So every day there was an auction, and it would finish in 7 days' time, and they were all selling. By the middle of February, I was earning the same amount that I was earning at my full-time job. So I spoke to my employers, and I thought, and I asked them, and I said, is it okay if I just hand my notice in, give 2 weeks, and can I just go? And they gave me their blessing and said, of course. So I worked out my 2 weeks at the job. By the end of February, I left my job, and I found myself in the position of being a full-time painter, which was a dream come true. And I was still selling. I was still painting a painting a day. And by the end of March, I had driven my van down to the south of France, and I was selling paintings from the back of my van on the beach in the south of France to people in the UK. So that was how I began. And to bring it back to the mental health thing, I took myself from quite a depressed state of thinking that I was literally, I thought I was going through a cross between a midlife crisis and just needed an adventure. And I put those two things together and mixed it all up with some creativity, and then created what essentially is my dream job. And that was how I began becoming a painter. And since then, I travelled thousands and thousands of miles in my van. I went from place to place. All I needed was the internet so that I could put paintings online, and I could have my PayPal account set up. I could put the auctions on eBay. I could post work up. I could write the blog about what I was doing, and I would get the money. And all of the paintings sold. Some for a little. There were a fair few that did just go for the 99p, but some went for 60 to 80 quid. So it all balanced out. That lasted for a long time. It was six, 7, nearly 8 years that I was doing that consistently. I was travelling various places. I was going to Cornwall. I was going through Devon, all along the south coast. I spent 4 months in France, which was just an incredible experience. It was beautiful.
Do you speak French?
C'est pas mal. I don't speak brilliant French, but I speak okay French, and I can get by. It's quite strange when you're in France, or when I was there. I took the basic French that I knew and suddenly found myself getting better. Literally by every few days, I was finding myself getting better. I think if I'd have stayed for 6 months or a year, I'd got pretty fluent at it. But yeah, when you're immersed in it, and the only thing you can do is speak and listen to French, then you start to survive a bit better each day. So yeah, it's not too bad. It's got rusty again now. But everything was great up until we hit the pandemic. So we got to the pandemic. What was it, back in 2019, 2020?
Yeah, end of 2019.
Yeah, so the pandemic, that hit in 2019, and I was lucky that I had a place to park my van, which was on a farm in Dorset, in a place called Purbeck. I'd been staying at Purbeck a lot. I was using it as a base because it's a stunningly beautiful place in the south, on the south coast. It's got the place called it's got the Jurassic Coast, which stretches from Poole Harbour all the way along through down into Devon, and all of that is just stunning, beautiful stretch of coastline. So the pandemic, I found myself grounded. I couldn't go out. I couldn't visit places. I couldn't go into favourite locations and paint. I was stuck in one place. I was very lucky to have the place and the farm that I was staying at, and I had the top floor of a barn to use as a studio. So I was still working, but as it goes, as things happen, I did get involved with a lady, and it was when there was gaps in the pandemic. We had a gap in it before it went back into lockdown again, and we got together and I ended up moving in with her. But we got on so well. It was brilliant. We then moved out of there and we moved to Glastonbury together. And we both had vans at that point. So we had his and hers camper vans, which was brilliant. So we moved to these allotments in Glastonbury. Beautiful place again. We were so lucky to have that. They were just happy to have us there because we were kind of like guardians, a little bit of security kind of thing. Talking of mental health, the allotments were for people with either mental health issues or special needs. And so they could get a day or 2 days in there to do gardening, which is incredibly therapeutic, kind of like a self-help area where people could get together and just do gardening. It was beautiful. So my girlfriend and I stayed there for a while, and then I had a bit of a disaster. We went to see her parents up in Swindon. I drove my van up there. When we were driving back, it was late at night, it was raining, we were going round a corner. I was totally under the speed limit, but there was a bit of an idiot had parked on the other side of the road, and someone in a Land Rover with a trailer on the back came up behind that car, went to overtake it and didn't really see me coming. So I ended up slamming the brakes on, didn't stand a chance, and slammed head on into the trailer at the back of this Land Rover and flipped the trailer over, completely smashed the front of my van in, and it was a total write-off. That was devastating, absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
Well, I feel extremely lucky that neither myself or my girlfriend got any serious damage ourselves or injuries, but my van was completely written off. It was totaled. Bearing in mind, it was my pride and joy anyway, but the history behind that vehicle was more than just a van to me. It had been my home for years. It had been the beginning of a project. Yeah, I did lose it quite badly after that. I was very good on the outside. I kept it together on the outside, but on the inside, I started to go downhill quite quickly. The insurance payout was terrible. They'll go all out to give you the best insurance possible. When you go to claim, then it's just ridiculous. I got about 2/3 of what my van was worth. Because it was in the pandemic, I went to buy another van, another VW camper van. But van prices have gone absolutely through the roof at that point. I just really didn't know what to do. I was really depressed at that point. That had a lot of strain on the relationship. I just wanted to be alone. I just wanted to disappear somewhere. So I did, and I had to break up for her and my sanity. I decided to just leave. And I landed on my feet a little. I was lucky that some friends in Dorset, they were renting out an old converted coach on their land. And I moved into that. And I stayed in that coach. It had a great big wood burner, had a cooker, big double bed at the back, really lovely people, beautiful land. And I stayed there over winter. I had a great time. I found myself getting back into the swing of painting again. After the crash, I practically stopped painting. I wasn't earning much money. We got a bit of a payout from the government being self-employed. So that was basically just what I lived on. I didn't have that spark of creativity. I felt like I'd lost it. But when I was in that coach, I found that coming back again. And I started painting a lot more. Again, I was so lucky that my customers and people that were seeing the paintings were still there and they still wanted to buy. And I started making a bit of money again, which was great. They rented that coach out under the provision that it was only until, I believe it was June the following year. So I did leave in June and I went and stayed at a friend's house. Again, I was without a vehicle. I was a bit kind of lost. I didn't know what I was doing. Losing that camper van, that really was the crux of the kind of downhill travel for me. And I spent a couple of months staying with my really lovely friend in Dorchester, and it was just something nagging away at me, thinking that I've got to do something. I've got to get out of this rut. And there was something in the back of my mind and it is very strange when ideas manifest themselves. They kind of, you get inspiration from different places. You don't just have an idea and go, I'm going to do that. You get a little bit of a fragment from here, a little bit of an inspiration from there. Those things kind of like start coming together, and then this idea forms and manifests itself and literally just won't go away. And that idea was to go and walk the South West Coast Path, which, if people know about it, it's become a lot more well known in recent years, especially from the book The Salt Path, which is going to come out as a film next April as it goes. But the South West Coast Path, it's a continuous path. It's the longest continuous path in the UK, which traditionally stretches from Minehead in North Somerset, goes all the way down the coast of North Cornwall, round Land's End, and all the way along the south coast to Poole. And it's 630 miles in total. I just thought, I really want to do that. I want to walk the South West Coast Path. My housemate that I was renting from, she goes, I've got a rucksack here you can use. And I went, thanks very much. I bought myself some boots. I got a few bits of camping equipment. I bought a tent off eBay, and I basically just had nothing other than that. I thought, I'm going to take painting gear, but how do I do this? Because I can't take easels and canvases and whatever. And I had a bit of a brainstorm with a friend of mine, and he actually came up with the idea, why don't you just take single sheets of canvas, get a roll of canvas, cut some single sheets out of it, and somehow paint on those. So I did devise this plan. What I essentially use is just a flat piece of cardboard that I could spray glue the sheet of canvas to. And I invented a drying box with which was about 2 inches deep, which the canvas would sit in, and it would have a ridged lid on it so that the top of the box couldn't touch the canvas. So I could carry wet oil paintings with me.
So oil paintings take, well, depending on how thick you lay the paint on, they can take months to dry. They were presumably still taking quite a while to dry while you were carrying them around.
Firstly, I used a quick drying oil paint, Griffin Alkyd. It's by Winsor & Newton. It's Griffin Alkyd oil paint. I swapped out some of the slower drying colours for those. Some colours dry naturally quite quick, but some take a long time, like cadmium red, sap green, ivory black, cadmium yellow. Those colours can take quite a long time to dry. But if you swap them out for Griffin Alkyd, then they dry literally within a day to 2 days.
Oh.
I did a trial run, did one painting, I put it in the box, I left it, and by the next day it had dried. I also use a lot of titanium white, and that tends to get mixed in with a lot of other things when you're toning down with oil painting. So I use Griffin Alkyd in the titanium white, so you're actually adding a drying medium, a quick drying medium, into the paints that are slow drying anyway. So that sped up the drying process loads. So literally the 1st of September, I had my bag packed. I got 60 sheets of canvas in a box. I packed my oil paints in. I needed a jar of white spirit with some spare white spirit. I needed brushes. I had all of that in the bottom of my rucksack. And then all the other things I had, I just had the trousers I was wearing, 3 pairs of socks, a t-shirt, a jacket, a tent, some cooking gear, and a sleeping bag, and a couple of other bits and bobs, like obviously a torch, and that was it. I believe I had £220 in the bank. That was all I had. I went to Lidl's and I got a bag of shopping, and my housemate took me down to Poole Harbour, gave me a hug and said, off you go, and I just trudged off down the beach. I only got 500 yards, because it was in the evening. I only walked 500 yards and then pitched my tent in the sand dunes, cooked up some food, watched the sun go down and went to sleep. And the next morning I woke up very early, 5:30, as it was September the 2nd, and I thought, I am now on the South West Coast Path, so here we go. Let's go.
So you set off on this expedition with a tent, really on the cusp of winter, right? September, things are going to start to change. How long did you expect it to take?
It's supposed to take about 2 months if you do it properly. If you do it daily, 3 months if you're not very fit. So I thought September to the end of October, going into November, it's not too bad. I found out very, very quickly indeed that weight is a massive issue. Well, however much weight you're carrying is a big, big issue. I didn't realise, but essentially the ideal weight for carrying hiking gear is that I think it's about a third of your body weight is the maximum. And I was carrying 22 kilos. So I'm not completely sure how much I weigh, but 22 kilos is a lot for anybody. And I realised very quickly, because I was walking on the beach, which is actually the most difficult terrain to walk along the beach. I got to the first bin that I found along the beach, and I started decanting things out of my bag, and certain food items that I thought, I'm not going to eat this within the next 3 or 4 days, and I just need to get rid of as much weight as possible. Yeah, that first day of walking that path, I hit the first hill, which goes up to Old Harry Rocks, and I had a walking pole with me, and I'm glad I did. Trying to get up that very first hill with that backpack on, I then realised that I was very unfit. I wasn't fit at all. At every 100 yards I was stopping and wheezing and out of breath. But I got to the top of the hill and I got to Old Harry Rocks, which is the first landmark. I think that was 7.5 miles I managed on the first day, and I was absolutely shattered. I managed to find a little place to pitch my tent just above the beach, spent the night there, and the next morning I woke up. It was early, I got the sunrise, and I thought, I'm going to do a painting. Let's get this underway. And I got the painting gear out, and I painted the first painting. And it was just basically a sunrise with the beach. Next day, carried on, and every day just did a painting. I couldn't believe it, because within a few days I'd walked 40 miles along that coast, and I felt myself starting to get a bit fitter. And amazingly, and this is the most important thing, is I felt a massive amount of relief. Like all the stress and the pressure and the things that had happened previously had just been lifted off me like a weight. It's a bit of a cliche, but I felt alive. I felt enthusiastic about what I was doing. sitting in a field overlooking the sea and just watching the butterflies, just having a rest, drinking water. It's the simplest thing in the world, but I felt so happy knowing that I was doing the paintings and I had all of this experience to look forward to. Yet again, I started posting these paintings online. I started taking video blogs of myself, videoing where I was, showing people the locations, and that started to become really popular. I was getting a lot of hits, a lot of Facebook views. Soon enough, people started asking, how much are the paintings? Are these for sale? So instead of eBaying them, I just put a message out saying, here's all the paintings I've done so far. I've done 10 at that point. Said, here they all are. Here's how many miles they are of the path so far. Here's the locations. And I just put them all up for sale at £80 each. And I said, instead of paying the £80, you can pay £50 as a reserve to reserve the painting and then hold £30 back. And then if you'll allow me to keep hold of the paintings, then when I finish the walk, I'll frame it, exhibit all of them as a show, and then I'll post it to you. And very kindly, everyone that offered to buy the paintings said, but that's fine, keep hold of them. So I suddenly found myself getting painting sales in of £50 each, just for doing a walk and painting a painting each day. And I started to get into the routine of painting paintings every day, or as near to every day as I could. And then on a Sunday, I'd have a rest and go into an establishment like a pub or a cafe. I'd go online, put all the paintings up, list them, say what was for sale, and then I'd suddenly, within an hour, I'd have sold either most of them or all of them. And they all sold. I was in heaven. And it got through to November. That was in 2021. And that was when the massive storms hit. And I did battle through the storms. And I didn't do very well with it. I was on the cliff tops. It was getting really dangerous. I had a couple of smashed tent nights where my tent just got absolutely demolished. And then on the third time that happened, I was scared because I was absolutely soaking wet. It was getting close to 0 degrees. And I thought, I think I've come to the end of this chapter. So I took a break and I went back. I was lucky to go back to the coach for that winter again in Dorchester. And as soon as it got to July the next year, I got back on the path from where I finished and then began again. So that was St Ives. I'd got as far as St Ives, which was 415 miles in the first leg. So yeah, I actually spent 4 months and the second leg of just going from St Ives all the way up to Minehead, because I found myself loving it so much that I didn't want it to end. So whenever I got to certain locations that I felt comfortable, that I was out of the way, that I could pitch my tent where nobody knew, and there was enough supplies nearby, like a shop, and somewhere that I could get online easily, I might stay there for 3 or 4 days, even a week at a time. Again, doing the paintings, absolutely loving it. They were all selling. I finished the walk on the 22nd of October, 2022. I went back to Dorchester. I arranged to have an exhibition of all the paintings that I'd sold and created. And I was very lucky to get a spot, ironically, at Dalston Castle, which was the very first place that I stayed in when I began the walk. So they offered me what's called the Belvedere Suite on the top floor, which had 360-degree panoramic of the area of the coast. I hosted an exhibition there, and I painted, by that time, it was 147 paintings, of which documented the entire South West Coast Path from my perspective. And I lined them up along the wall so that they were in chronological order. Loads of people came. The comments were fantastic. Everybody seemed to really enjoy the show. It was incredibly humbling. And that was the culmination of a project that had taken me approximately 2 years. So I'd never had an exhibition before. I'd put paintings in a pub, but I'd never had a proper solo exhibition. So for me, that really hit the nail on the head for my personal humble achievement that I'd set out to do, that had stemmed from having these mental health issues of depression, not knowing what to do with myself, suffering loss, going through that, and thinking, well, creativity, that's how I get through. I need to be creative. I need to be doing something that is creative. And if I'm not, I know that I will start to go back down that slope again. So it's a huge thing for me, and it's something that's set in stone for life for me now. I'll always be painting. I'll always be making music. And I have to keep remembering that if I do stop doing it, the ladder is presented in front of me, and I can either go down it or I can start creating again. So it's a fantastic kind of like benchmark to know if you start feeling a bit dodgy with yourself, then stop what you're doing and go and paint a picture.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same for me. My studio is my refuge, and I have to be painting. And when I'm not, I just descend really quickly. So I fully get that. So you've since done a trip around summer Scotland?
I have, yeah. Again, when I finished the walk, I finished the exhibition. I did that. I found myself in the same place again. I was like, what am I going to do now? I'm a bit lost now. But I gathered myself up and I thought, as soon as the weather starts to get a bit warmer, I'm going to hit Scotland and I'm going to hike through and I'm going to paint the Highlands. That's been a dream that I'd wanted to do for a long time as well. So that coincided with the incredibly generous offer from my lovely friends that said, if you want keys to this house, it's in Durham. And I thought, Durham, that's close to Scotland. So I jumped at the chance of accepting the key and moved up here to this lovely, lovely property. They say that I'm doing them a favour by looking after it, and essentially I've just commandeered it into a painting studio. So they absolutely love, because they've had loads of paintings of me. I hiked through Scotland. I spent 2.5 months. I didn't paint as many paintings as went on the coast path. I think it was about 28. But again, most of those sold. Very, very different to the coast path because of, one, the weather. It would rain for 2 or 3 days on the trot. It's a lot colder at times, and then suddenly it's baking hot. So it's very difficult to plan. Internet reception has a lot to be desired. So there's quite a few factors that did stand in my way. Again, I planned to do it. I did it. Loved it. I'm planning to go back to do the Hebridean Way when it gets warm again, but that's next year. Because I do look back, and when you're thinking, have I really done anything? Have I achieved anything? Yes, painting paintings is a lovely thing to do. The humbleness, again, I have to keep going back to that, because when people do say that they love what you're doing, and they say, I gave that to a family member as a gift, and they absolutely love it. That's a special place that you painted, and they've now got a permanent reminder of it from you. That's amazing. That's an amazing feeling. That makes you feel so good. I kept a pretty good catalogue over time, and I think it's just over 2,200 that I've painted and I've sold. So that's just over 11 years. Those aren't going anywhere. They'll continue to be there forever. So that's something that is amazing to think about. That's kind of like leaving a legacy of where I've travelled to, where I've been, because all of these paintings literally just document where I've travelled and my personal perspective of how amazing the world is, about how amazing the coastline is. Special little things like a robin coming and sitting on a twig next to you. Paint the robin, immortalise them.
Yeah, well, it's an amazing travelogue, right? I mean, who can say they've done something like that? And 2,000 paintings. Well, yeah, I'm pretty prolific, but I don't think I'm anything close to that. So that's actually incredible. Your paintings themselves, are they all 12 by 12 inch? Is that right?
No, they vary wildly. The ones I did on the coast path, they were all 8 inch by 8 inch. And they were single pieces of canvas, which I then mounted and framed. And the frames themselves went to 12 inch by 12 inch. So they had a floating frame. And just to note, I found that the frames were so expensive to buy. If I wanted 140 frames, that's a lot of money. That went into the thousands of pounds. Yeah. So I was kind of forced and coerced by friends to go down the route of buying the frame material myself, buying all the hardboard, buying all the mounting card, and then I spent a week making all the frames by hand in a garage. So I had to cut 147 times 4, whatever that is, 600 of the edges. I had to cut those with 90 degree angles, super glue all those angles together, and then cut out 147 squares out of 147 pieces of card. So
that's a lot harder than I think most people think. Just getting a clean 45 degree angle out of a piece of wood is actually, you've got to have a decent mitre saw or whatever, and you're like a fragment out, like, and it's not going to go together ever, right? And I've tried this before, and I've wasted so much wood. Luckily, not like expensive framing wood, but like I've wasted so much wood getting this wrong, and I just gave up. I've got this guy who sort of helps me out with woodwork stuff. He just laughs at me. I just take it around his house now and say, Mike, can you saw this for me? Because I ain't doing it.
Yeah, I worked on that. I was getting up at 7 a.m. I was starting work at 8, and I was finishing well into the night time, so 9-10 o'clock at night. And I did that for about a week, because I only found out that I had the exhibition a week before I had it. So I then realised that I had to get all of this work framed within a week, and I finished framing them the day before the exhibition.
Wow.
That was how close it was. But yeah, that was 10-hour days.
Amazing. Yeah, the music. So I spotted an Instagram video of you playing a song about a seal. Did you write that? I think you wrote that, right?
Oh yeah. I wrote that for a friend of mine that I was seeing for a while. She used to go surfing, and there's a seal that always used to visit her when she was surfing. So I wrote her a song.
I went swimming in the sea, brave old me, in Scotland, in a place called Montrose, a bit sort of northeast coast. I had a wetsuit on. I'm not that stupid. And this seal just popped up and was just staring at me. It was really weird. And then in the background, there was all these dolphins, like probably about a mile away, but you could see these dolphins cavorting in the ocean. It was quite simply one of the most magical moments of my life. I was like, this stuff doesn't happen, but it's all here, folks, in Scotland. Yeah.
Oh, blimey, yeah. I mean, just to go back to music, I grew up on making music. It's a very, very strong passion of mine. I did the rock and roll thing. I stood on stage and rocked out with a really cool band for 4 or 5 years. But when I moved to London, the making music for films, that was wonderful. It's something that I really want to get back into at some point. I have done some now and again, but we played some amazing venues. Again, we did the V&A. I played at Tate Modern, the British Museum, really quirky venues like museums and libraries and stuff. The British Library we played. The Cabinet of Living Cinema. The guy that founded that was living in London. He used to be the violin player or the viola player in an old band that I was playing in, but he left and moved to London. So when I moved to London, he got in touch with me and said, "You moved to London, do you want to get involved with this new project that started up?" Which was rescoring the music for films and playing it live. So I began that with him, and that grew very quickly. That was a really cool project. And it ended up with, we'd have anything up to 20 musicians on the books that we could bring in to do various instruments for various films. Yeah, so the band in London, that was amazing. But again, I mean, just to reiterate, from the reasons that I left London and essentially left the music scene at that time, was I just could not handle living in an area which didn't have the nature, so to speak. I really needed that. I needed adventure, and I needed to be in nature. So, yeah, that's what I did. Love music. I love painting. That's my creative outlets. I need to do that in order to keep my head in check. I feel incredibly lucky that I'm able to go practically anywhere, paint, and essentially make a living from it. That's a rare thing in this day and age. And it's something I've really worked towards. I've worked very, very hard at. But it seems that the universe has kind of like shined on me a little bit. And I've had an incredibly wonderful and generous customer base that have really stuck by me. So, that's I can only look forward to the future and keep going with what's going on.
Yeah, and keep an eye on the weather by the sounds of it. Living in Scotland myself, I can appreciate how challenging that must have been. And, I'm no doubt when you come back again, the weather's going to be all sorts of interesting for you. And maybe I'll try and zip up and meet you on the trail at some point. So where can people find you on the internet?
The best thing is I've got my Facebook painting page set up. So that's Rob Parkinson Painting. I've also got an Etsy shop where I sell signed limited edition prints of previous kind of best-selling, most popular work. And it's got my entire down the West Coast Path painting series on there, as well as the ones from Scotland. And that is the Painting Nomad. So it's Etsy, the Painting Nomad.
Okay, well, thank you for coming onto my podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I wish you luck on your travels next year.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. It's been a pleasure to meet and to share a bit of my experience. Thank you.